Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, as Lee said, if depending on where you're talking from. I'm in Tuana, Virginia, which is near Williamsburg. The Manuscript Society was founded in 1948 as the National Society of Autograph Collectors. But it has grown and does not just include collectors anymore. It also includes manuscript curators, librarians, dealers, auction houses, and not only has members in the United States and Canada, but also Asia, Australia, Europe, and South America. The mission of the Manuscript Society is to encourage the collection and preservation of manuscripts and documents, to stimulate and aid collectors in their various collecting specialties, facilitate the exchange of information and knowledge among collectors, scholars, dealers, and the general public. In addition to Manuscripts Mondays, we have an annual meeting every year. This upcoming year, I think it's going to be held in April. It's going to be in Boston, Massachusetts. We also have a quarterly journal, Manuscripts, and a quarterly newsletter, the Manuscript Society News. And we also have a scholarship program, the Richard Moss Research Grant. It's currently closed right now, but if you go on our online to our website, manuscripts.org, you'll see information about that and how you can apply. It will be available again next year, next spring. And as I mentioned, we have an annual meeting. But tonight, for the September Manuscript Mondays, we have Lynn Augsburger. Lynn is a currently the project coordinator of the Newman Numismatic Portal at Washington University in St. Louis. He's published widely in the field of American numismatics, and his most recent publication, the publication of Eric P. Newman, A Collector's Guide, summarizes a decade of curation of the Eric P. Newman numismatic papers. He's going to talk tonight about numismatics and the connection it has to manuscripts. Welcome, Lynn. We're really glad to have you here.
All right, thanks a lot. Let me get the screen sharing going. All right, so as Jay noted, I'm Len Augsburger. I'm the project coordinator of the Newman Numismatic Portal at Washington University in St. Louis. We digitize numismatic literature and make it available, universally available. So we've been doing that about 10 years and currently have about 100,000 documents in the collection. So, all right, let's jump in here. All right, so first off, what is numismatics? And briefly, it's the study of coins, metals, tokens, paper money, or money substitutes. And as numismatists and numismatic researchers, the questions we are asking are, why was something produced? Who did it? Why did they do it? How was the object used? And then what's come into the forefront a little bit more, since the population of collectors has increased, we start asking questions about, the collectors themselves. Who collected it? Who owned it? Pedigree is a very popular topic. And, certainly from manuscript perspective, you're asking, a lot of the same kind of questions. And if you have an interesting object, you want to know who owned it and, um, what collection it was in. And it just gives you a little bit more history of the object. And then, in terms of what's desirable, again, it's many of the same things that you would see in collecting manuscripts, rarity, condition, and then, also the story behind the object or the historical significance of it. And there's combinations of these things. Something might be very rare, but not very valuable. But when you get a combination of all of these together, you have a really desirable object. And I think that's true not only for coins, but also for manuscripts. Okay, so let's kind of look at some of the literature surrounding numismatics. Um, First thing we'll talk about is reference works. Now, remarkably, some of the earliest printed works dealt with numismatics, and I think part of this was because, for the first time, you can make an image of an object, or, you would engrave it on a copper plate or a wood plate. And you could now, through the magic of print, you could share that with somebody a great deal of distance away. So even in the 1500s, there are bibliographies of numismatic works. I find that remarkable, just, with uh, the Gutenberg Bible coming in the late 1400s, and then, just in the next century, you've got enough numismatic works out there that you can have bibliographies of them. In current practice, a lot of these books are really labors of love, produced in small quantities, typically by a very dedicated researcher who's very interested in a very narrow uh, aspect of the field. And they want to document their work. So they produce books, small print runs, very common. And a lot of numismatists are an inch wide and a mile deep. There's a book coming out uh, this year, I believe, and the only topic of the book is Lincoln cents dated or struck in 1922. Now the numismatists on the call tonight, very aware of the significance of that date, but there's some interesting things happening with 1 cent coins in that year. So somebody decided that it justified a whole book. The other thing you see is because authors are very highly invested in these works, it's very typical for them to make deluxe editions. So that's actually kind of fun. So I think certainly with mass market books, you don't really see deluxe editions, but with numismatic books, there are definitely a lot of them out there. And there's a small number of works that are mass marketed and actually work at that level, but they're few and far between. By far, the most significant one is the Guidebook of U.S. Coins, which has sold over 20 million copies since first published in 1946. For any book, that's one of the best sellers of all time. So um, we have that feather in our cap. But for the most part, we're dealing with very nichey, small print productions of books. All right. Another major portion of numismatic literature are the auction catalogs. Um, Numismatic auction sale catalogs first appear in Europe in the late 18th century, show up in the US about 50 years later. As is typical, throughout the 19th century, the US just sort of lags on everything. It was just a young country, um, and it took quite a while for us to catch up. The first real innovation in the numismatic auction sale catalogs was photography. Um, Again, now you could reproduce images of coins in a way that people had never seen before. So this got real popular in a hurry. And there's this kind of golden age in the late 19th century, early 20th century, um, before lithography and halftone images, where a lot of auction catalogers were actually putting photographic or copies of photographic plates into their catalogs. So these are great, very usable in terms of tracing provenance of coins. But then in the mid 20th century, it gets really cheap to print black and white halftone photographs. So a lot of the auction houses went to that format, and as a result, the usability and quality of some of these mid 20th century catalogs is not as good as we could hope. The other thing we see with auction catalogs is that quite typically they represent important collecting achievements on the part of a collector. So they want to have special editions of their catalogs. And so we see, again, as with reference books, a lot of deluxe editions of important numismatic sales. And then the other thing you see with the catalogs as well is, primarily they are sales vehicles, but there are a lot of catalogs that are significant references and even include original research. I was involved with a project with New York Historical Society a few years ago. They sold a duplicate piece from their collection. commissioned Heritage Auctions to prepare an entire catalog on that one single coin. And we got a lot of original research into that catalog, and uh, New York Historical was very pleased, and the coin sold for a lot of money. So obviously, Heritage was pleased, but that was just kind of a win-win-win for everybody, including the cause of numismatic scholarship. All right. The other thing we see in numismatic literature are a lot of periodicals. They're both published commercially and by a lot of numismatic clubs and institutions. Um, what we see in the greatest number of these were in the 1960s, and what was going on in the country was we had very strong growth in coin collecting in that period in the 50s and 60s. And then when the US Mint pulled the silver out of the coinage in 1965, there's just a very strong interest in the general public uh, pulling their silver coins out of circulation and holding them for the long term, or just as a store of value. Um, but of course, what happens when people do that is that eventually all the good coins disappear out of circulation, and then there's not so much interest anymore. So today there's a lot less interest in coin collecting than there was a couple generations ago. Um, but conversely, what's happening is we have a lot of baby boomers who were collecting during that very fertile period, and now adults and with more resources and getting into the higher end of the market in a big way. So um, still a lot of interest, but it kind of rotates over time. Okay. All right, and then let's get into the archival material, which is sort of more near and dear to us as members of the Manuscript Society. Um, so there are, actual manuscripts. This example here um, is the author's handwritten copy of the book. It's in the Hamelberg collection in Illinois. Um, and this is one of the earliest overviews of U.S. coinage. So what happened was in 1856, technically, we converted from these large format 1 cent coins to these smaller format 1 cent coins, which are similar to the format that we have today. These old coins were really bulky and heavy, and not that practical. So the mint decided we're going to go to this smaller format coin, and for whatever reason, this just really captured the public interest, and it was really at this time that you see a pretty strong growth in numismatics within the United States. Okay. Um, Continuing on in archival material. Correspondence is a big portion of this. Collectors are pack rats, and they collect anything. I'm in like all these different coin clubs, and they send me these membership cards, and I can't throw them away. So I have this really big collection here. Um, so correspondence gets saved too. For basically the last 10 years, I've been working with the Eric P. Newman papers. Uh, Literally over 10,000 pieces of correspondence. This particular piece here is from 1939. He's writing to the executors of the Colonel E.H.R. Green collection and attempting to get some items out of the estate. Colonel Green was the son of Hetty Green, who was known as the Witch of Wall Street. And when she passed away, uh, kind of the floodgates opened, and Colonel Green started indulging himself in any way that he could think of. Uh, one of which was collecting. I was a big coin collector. So this estate finally opens up in the late 30s and early 40s, and Eric P. Newman ends up getting a lot of things out of this estate. Um, all of the correspondence, all of which he saved. So this is now we've processed this and digitized this, so a lot of this material is online now. Okay, another thing we see in numismatic literature, along the lines of archival material, are broadsides. This particular piece here is from 1828. It's an uh, early sale of a numismatic collection, and included a mix of ancient coins, modern British coins, and U.S. colonial coins. Um, and for many years, we actually thought this was the earliest public numismatic sale in the country. It turns out it was back in the 1700s. But in any case, this was produced as a broadside. I'm not even sure how many copies of this there are. It's probably less than five. It was famous enough that maybe 10, 20 years ago, the American Numismatic Society did some reprints of this. So everybody could have a ANS authorized copy. But anyway, so there are a few broadsides out there. All right, this is another broadside. This is a plate displaying American colonial currency. Um, Very large plate, 25 by 21, displaying 14 examples of colonial paper money. It almost looks like the notes have been applied, but this is the actual engraving. They were able to change the color, and so it's a pretty good recreation of these notes. This was actually a fold-in to a much smaller booklet, so it was kind of unwieldy, getting that into the booklet and folding it out. So as a result, some of the copies have been disbound, um, probably a lot of them lost. And there are a few things that was interesting about this one. First of all, it was a St. Louis imprint in 1851, and uh, there was little numismatic activity in that area at that time. Most of the activity was out on the East Coast in, Boston and New York and Philadelphia. So to have a publication even in St. Louis in 51 is pretty remarkable. Um, and another very curious thing about this one, we actually found the printing contract for this, and it's in the Center for Jewish History in New York. And we learned that the plate engraving was $75, and then the printing cost was 4 cents a copy. What's interesting is that he seems not to have printed very many of these, because there's only like 4 copies known today. So this is uh, among numismatic literature collectors, a very, very desired items, but comes up for sale only rarely. There may be additional copies out there. That's probably the easiest way to get your own, I think. All right. Here's another thing. Along the lines within the classification of archival material, we also have ephemera. Um, and I'm not sure what the precise definition for that is, but sort of small one-off things, um, brochures. And this particular item is a single sheet that was issued by the U.S. Mint in 1945. Probably when you went to the mint, there was a pile of these there, and you could take one. Um, and it sort of it clarifies the U.S. Mint policies with respect to different coinage programs that they sold to the public. And This particular item, very rare, very fragile, not necessarily valuable, but it does have some useful information in it. If somebody, for example, were writing about proof set programs, this might be of use. So we see a lot of items in this classification as well. Okay. All right. Moving on, there's another piece of ephemera. This is a recent story that developed. I thought it would be good to share here tonight. Um, this particular piece, it was mailed in 1992 to about 60 numismatic literature collectors around the country. And it advertised a public sale April 1st, 1992. Um, and it's written in such a way that the author seems to not really grasp the significance of the items that are being presented for sale. Um, he says, many old catalogs, though a number of them have been marked up with prices and various names. Well, if you're collecting numismatic literature and an auction sale catalog has prices and names, it's actually more desirable. Um, and then there was another tell in here. Of course, the sale was April 1st. The auctioneer's name was Emendacious, which is basically a phonetic pun for the word mendacious or not true. And then the sale location was said to be this 1204 Magnolia in Fort Worth, which, if the numismatic literature specialist should have recognized that as a prominent dealer who lived there in the first, operated out of that address in the first half of the 20th century. So this was all, basically an April Fool's prank that only recently has been resolved. So let's talk about that a little bit. So this all sort of goes back to this thing called the Count Forza affair, and in it was the same kind of deal, except it was a rare book sale as opposed to just numismatic literature. Um, but this catalog was issued, and it was convincing enough that a lot of book collectors showed up in this town in Belgium in 1840, expecting a public sale of the Count Fortzau library. And as auction catalogs often do, at the beginning of the catalog, they give some background on the collector. And the collector was said to have collected only works that didn't show up in bibliographies. And if he found a bibliography that contained a listing of a book he owned, he would sell the book or burn the book. And he's basically said to have supposedly hastened his death when a particular bibliography came out and he had to get rid of a third of his collection. The sale, of course, was fictitious, but the lot descriptions were aimed at specific collectors. And some of these people showed up and they get there and there's like a sign on the town hall that says, oh, there's not going to be a sale, we've put all the books in the library. Of course, as it turns out, there ends up being no library in the town, so people figure out they've been tricked. And the guy who did this, his name was Renier Chalon. He was actually a numismatist, as it turns out. And this whole thing has kind of created a cottage industry of related literature. And there's a lot of books and periodicals written about this whole thing. The catalog itself is collectible. There's multiple versions of the catalog because they reprinted it just because of demand. So you could actually put together a nice little library just on this Count Forza deal. So anyway, I think, well, I know for a fact that, the site sort of inspired the 1992 Emendacious sale. All right. Well, this all came out after the perpetrator passed away recently. Um, George F. Colby was really uh, in many ways, the father of numismatic literature collecting in the country. He put out the most academic catalogs and really pushed the science of the discipline much further along than it had been. So anyway, following his funeral, there was a meal, and his son. The first story he tells is about how his dad was a jokester, and he goes into this story of the Emendacious sale. And his son did not realize this was a big secret among the numismatic literature specialists. Didn't realize that it was something we'd been trying to figure out for a long time. And people would always ask George, is he the one that did it? And he would never deny it, never confirm it. But as it turns out, the sale flyers George Sr. had given to his son, who lived in Texas, and they were distributed out of Texas. They all have these Carrollton, Texas postmarks. And anyway, that was finally discovered, finally came to light. And then another interesting thing happened. George's papers had gone to the American Numismatic Society in New York, and it turns out he considered this whole thing significant enough that he kind of made a little diary of the whole thing, and we actually found his account of the emendacious caper in his own words. So we finally went full circle on that, and it was great to get that resolved. Um, and the related ephemera um, may actually be worth more now with the story completely out there. Okay. All right. Let's move on to just a few favorite items within numismatic literature, more manuscript oriented. First one is the copy of the Mint Act from April 2nd, 1792. This particular copy is signed by Thomas Jefferson, 4 pages. And you would not think that opening a mint and striking coins would be that controversial. But what went into this document was a pretty spirited discussion about whether they were going to put the head of George Washington on the nation's coinage. So, what was their tradition? They were all from Europe. All the European countries put their kings on the coin. I mean, that's just how it was. So they had to ask themselves, are they going to do the same thing with Washington? So in the North, you've got the Federalist Party, uh, very much in favor of strong central government, and they wanted to put Washington on the coin. And I'm making a gross generalization. It's not everybody, but generally that was the sentiment. And then in the South, you had the people more in favor of states' rights, of which probably Jefferson is the most famous proponent. So if you've seen Hamilton, this thread kind of runs through that 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 show. This idea of Jefferson versus Hamilton, and are we going to have a strong federal government, or going to be more oriented around states' rights? So the Southerners, generally did not like this idea of having Washington on the coinage. And as it turned out, in the end, it was a very close vote, 26-22. That was in favor of not putting Washington on the coinage and putting a figure of liberty instead. So, and then, we don't have any individuals on our coinage all the way until 1909, when the Lincoln cent was introduced. All right. Okay. Um, Another great item. These are the Virgil Brand collection ledgers. So Virgil Brand was a beer magnate in Chicago and had probably, what is probably the largest and most important U.S. collection of all time. Um, because he didn't have a big series of auction sales to sell the collection, it's not as well known as the ones that had important auction sales surrounding them. And this collection ended up being dispersed piecemeal over a pretty long period of time. So it doesn't have the notoriety that some other collections do. But in any case, Brand, whenever he made acquisitions, he would enter them into these ledgers. This here is number 37,000, but the whole series ends up going well over 100,000. And it's in 30 folio volumes at the American Numismatic Society in New York. and this was digitized about 10 years ago. Um, but again, the information in here, its main use is for pedigree. People really like tracing their coins. I think it kind of gives them this, historical connection to the past, or connection with some other collector. Um, and then with ancient coins, this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue because of cultural property laws and pedigrees that can show an ancient coin has been held for 100 years or 200 years, um, can be significant because there may have been laws passed after that that controlled you know the removal of coins from a particular country. So with a pedigree, you can say, hey, this is legit, it's fine. So becoming more of an issue with respect to ancient coins, but with American coins, it's really about pedigree. It's really about connecting with a previous collector. Okay. Um, all right. This is a fun item. Um, so the item on the left is just like a 2 by 3 inch piece of paper, and it's a proof of something called metal ruling. So there's this technology in the mid 19th century, um, prior to photography, where they had this problem of, okay, how do we, illustrate a coin in a book or a publication? We can engrave it into a plate, engrave it by hand, very, long process. You know, have to have certain artistic skill to do it correctly. And so a few people came up with this thing called metal ruling. And essentially, what it does is it's this machine that traces over a coin and creates these parallel lines uh, in the form of, like an engraving to the left. And then the way it creates this effect is you can see in the truncation here, where the height of the coin is changing quickly, the lines are further apart. And then in the flat fields where it's vertically all straight, the lines are close together. And so by varying the distance between these lines, you can create the illusion of the actual metal. And so this machine could basically mechanize this process of taking a three-dimensional coin or metal and creating an image that could be printed. Now, as you can see, this particular one isn't really an exact copy. For example, on the right here, on the actual metal, uh, the guy's kind of looking straight ahead, and then on the left, he kind of has like a downward cast. So not necessarily the most accurate rendering, but it does give you a pretty good idea of what the actual metal looks like. And so by mechanizing this thing, they could produce these volumes with just like hundreds of images in them. Um, there's a particular series that was done in France by Collat in the 1830s that's well thought of in this regard. But then, once photography comes in, there's less of a need to do this. So the numismatic connection here is that this Christian Gobrecht was an engraver for the U.S. Mint, and he also built this metal ruling machine that could make this basically rendering a 3D image on a two-dimensional plate. Um, so the actual plate itself that was used for this one is in the Smithsonian, so that was kind of a fun find to see. All right. Here's another fun item. This is from the Charlotte Mint. It was a volume compiled by the superintendent. Um, it's got copies of the Coinage Acts, and then it's got a lot of personal notes in it as well. So it's really his sort of the volume that he consults on a daily basis to get his job done. He's got a list of things he has to do monthly, report to the director in Washington, check the Bullion journals, and so on. And then he's got some other things that he has to do quarterly. um, send receipts and expenditures to the Treasury. Um, so this was a neat item. This actually came out of the Eric P. Newman collection and sold by Heritage just last year. So um, so we do occasionally see things like this. Um, uh, Most of this material went into the National Archives, but some of it has slipped out. It could be that this guy took the book home or whatever, who knows. Um, and then there was another similar item that Wayne Omren just found a few weeks ago on AB Books. It was from the melter and refiner at the San Francisco Mint, and he took a trip out to the East Coast, went to these foundries and smelters and the mint, and just took notes on everything he saw in terms of melting and refining metal. And that volume just kind of got out there in the wild and showed up on AB Books a few weeks ago. So there's still a lot of interesting finds to be made if you just keep watching the used book sites. All right, let's talk about National Archives a little bit. Unfortunately, we can't collect this material because it's all in the National Archives. But our project, Newman Numismatic Portal, does a lot of digitization in this area at the various National Archives locations, College Park, Maryland, Washington, um, and other locations. Um, so this is just there's millions of pieces of paper in there related to the U.S. Mint. So National Archives was basically, in many ways, kind of a Depression public works project, make work project. And so most of the information from the Mint flowed into the National Archives at that time. Um, and they didn't get all of it, but they got a lot of good stuff. And this is accessible today by and large. Um, so this particular letter is the director of the Mint is responding to a guy at the Central Union Trust Company in New York who seems to be in possession of an important pattern piece, 1792 pattern 1 cent piece. This would have been prepared in the very early days of the Mint, and to anyone studying the early U.S. coinage, this would be of interest. So we've digitized a lot of this. There's a long way to go, but we've been able to get some pretty important groups out there and make it public. So, okay. All right. So research resources that we use, the American Numismatic Society Library Catalog. They've been in business 150 years. It's just a tremendous resource. They've got over 200,000 items listed in the library catalog. Obviously, a lot of books and auction catalogs and periodicals and so forth, but there is manuscript material there as well. Our own project, the Newman Numismatic Portal, has about 100,000 documents, and that's completely digitized. And then another thing we use, the Colby and Fanning auction sale catalogs. Again, George was really writing some of the most significant auction catalogs from the period when he started in the 1960s. So these are very good references. And then his successor is continuing very much in the same spirit. And so they're still operating. Early American imprints is something that comes in pretty handy. So this is basically anything published in the United States prior to 1820. It's actually been scanned, usually from the American Antiquarian Society. And this is an online database. Unfortunately, you've got to go through an institution to get access. I get it through Washington University. But this is a really useful resource for dealing with some of this early material. The Hamelberg Library for Numismatic Material. For American Numismatics, it is the best library, and he's got some really neat items. And he's always willing to have visitors. So if you're passing through Champaign, do let Dan know. And then the Library of Congress, starting to digitize more things. So this is also a good resource. And then another thing that comes in handy, Founders Online has the correspondence of all the founding fathers on there. And the last few years, especially, as this has come out, we've been mining that for numismatic tidbits. And, for example, we talked about this issue of putting Washington's portrait on the coinage. That was controversial enough that it shows up in a letter written by Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife. So um, there are a lot of really interesting tidbits in Founders Online. So that comes in handy as well. All right. And with that, I will go to Q&A. So if there are any questions out there, let's go into that. I'm going to stop sharing at this point. Okay. And I do see some of our numismatic literature friends online tonight, so you may have questions as well.
Here's one question, Lynn, from Carmen Valentino. Might you be so kind to describe the 1728 American broadside?
Sure. So that's actually not a broadside. The 1728 was in reference to the earliest public numismatic auction sale in the country. So I'd have to look it up, but it was probably printed in a newspaper, is my guess.
And I've got a question. Explain the Newman portal again. Are those materials that are at Washington University or just an aggregation of materials related to numismatics around the country?
Yeah, we don't have a physical collection. It's been just stuff that's been loaned to us. Or, we did digitize the Newman papers before selling them. But yeah, no physical collection. It's just a lot of it is just literature that people make accessible to us and we borrow it.
And how did you get involved in this field?
Uh, the short story is I was invited to participate on the Eric P. Newman biography that was published by Heritage Auctions. The Newman collection first sold between 2013 and 2018, and they felt that, biography might help to market this. So I got called in to work on that. And then the Newman Foundation decided that they wanted to create an online reference, and it just kind of all fit together.
And from Brad Cook, the editor of manuscripts, what is the best handwritten document regarding numismatics that you know of? Or what is the best handwritten item in your own collection if you want to disclose such a thing?
Oh, wow. I'm gonna have to dial a friend on this one. So if any of the other numismatic literature people want to chime in here. We looked at the 1792 Minax signed by Jefferson. That item, I think, is the most significant. Well, yeah, most significant and, also highest priced American numismatic item. I'm trying to think what else is out there in terms of handwritten stuff. Um, okay, so there's something called the McAllister Memorandum. It's written by John McAllister, Philadelphia antiquarian in 1844, and he talks about going to the mint and talking to Adam Eckfeldt, who was like, the old guy in the mint at that time, and talking about the earliest coinage of the U.S. That's a pretty significant item. There's like 3 copies out there. I think 2 of them are missing, but um, that's one really important one I can think of offhand. In terms of what I personally own, I have some significant books, but I can't think of a manuscript item that I own offhand, but I probably do. I forget things that I own.
And here's a comment from Roger Moore in the chat. He says, great talk, and suggests that researchers of pre-federal coinage documents should consult the Philadelphia Library Company, Pennsylvania Historical Society, and the American Philosophical Society.
Yeah, these are all great. The American Philosophical Society has papers from Robert Patterson, early 19th century mint director. At the Historical Society, we found a document from David Rittenhouse related to the initial coinage of silver dollars in the United States. And yeah, I've spent a lot of time in all of those, and they're all great. All right,
And
Wayne says the Hickox manuscript is the most important American manuscript in the numismatic literature field, and I think I could probably not argue with that.
which institutions out there have some of the best numismatic collections in the United States or in the world?
So the big one is American Numismatic Society in New York. The American Numismatic Association in Colorado Springs also has a good physical collection. Yale, Notre Dame have good collections. My university, Washington University, has an important ancient coin collection. Um, but a lot of this stuff is privately held. So, and of course, I have to mention the Smithsonian, the National Numismatic Collection. That's they've got over 1 million objects, and that's kind of the national collection, and that one's just foundational.
In your opinion, what is the best piece of a coin or metal or piece of currency that you've handled or seen in person? Most
Um,
interesting to you?
yeah, so a lot of these things get displayed at coin conventions. The big thing right now is the 1933 $20 gold piece. Um, of which there are 12 known. Only one can be legally owned. Um, but that's currently the most valuable numismatic item. The one that could be legally owned recently sold for 18 million and change. So that's at the top of that list right now.
And a couple more questions in the Q&A. Ravi Goel asked about how can numismatic manuscripts trace the provenance and movement of coin collections across borders? And have you encountered any cases where manuscripts reveal export or import restrictions and how these are documented?
Yeah, I don't. I work with U.S. numismatics more than ancient and foreign numismatics, but what I would say here is um, typically if there's an important collector, he had an important collection, they will usually have papers somewhere, and you just have to ferret out, which archives has these. So, for example, we're doing some digitization work with an archive in Philadelphia right now related to Gilroy Roberts, the engraver of the Kennedy half dollar. And there just happens to be this collection at the Community College of Philadelphia that has the Gilroy Roberts stuff. So, typically you get the name of some individual, involved in this, and, you try and go find their papers.
And Roger Burdett says he sent you a group of historically interesting documents turning up in the newly digitized NARA material, National Archives material. And it's about one is an original letter from FDR asking for World War One Samoan Chief Medal.
Yeah, so uh, Roger pretty much knows more about numismatic material in the National Archives than anyone else, and he's constantly finding stuff in there. So, and he forwards it to us, and we get it posted on Newman Portal and make it accessible. So, um, can't say enough about Roger's dedication to working the National Archives.
I've got another question. I just recently read a book called The Rebel and the Rose about the Confederate gold. Have you ever seen examples of some of that that supposedly went missing or is buried? But have you seen anything that popped up because some of it was taken by others and
And sure. So
distributed?
I actually wrote a book in 2008, published by Maryland Historical Society, called Treasure in the Cellar. It was the story of a gold find made in 1934 in Baltimore, in the buried in the dirt in the cellar underneath the tenement house. And there was an author who came along after that, took that work and made a circumstantial case that this was Confederate gold. The person who almost certainly buried it was known as a Confederate sympathizer, um, but how connected he was to any Confederate conspiracies is more a matter of conjecture. But yeah, that find, which absolutely happened and which was well documented, possibly was Confederate.
No, during your talk, you mentioned the fake auctions and stuff like that. Anything about the forgery of coins and currency?
Yeah, so that's a whole field on its own, and it's an absolutely constant battle. And the manufacturers of coins and paper money are trying to stay ahead of the counterfeiters and introducing more anti-counterfeiting technology all the time. More on paper money now than coins because most of the activity is much more profitable if you're counterfeiting paper money. So there are tons of security devices on the paper money that we don't know about. I have a friend who works at Crane Paper Manufacturing in Atlanta, who make paper for U.S. and world banknotes, and he can't tell me anything about what he does. It's just, it's very, very, very tight-lipped. But yeah, that's it's an ongoing struggle. Now, what we haven't seen is now within manuscripts, you can have fake copies, like the Hitler diaries and what else out there. We haven't seen that in the field of numismatic literature, thankfully. It's still small enough that uh, there's not a lot of well, there would be incentive to do it, but it would be hard to get away with it because the field is small enough. But in the wider field of manuscripts, I think that's more of an issue.
And a question from Harrison Wick: what is your favorite coin?
So my favorite coin, in 1907, Theodore Roosevelt decided that we need more artistic coinage. Engaged the artist Augustus St. Gaudens, a well-known sculptor, and his most famous coin is this 1907 ultra high relief $20 gold piece. It's really more like a medal than a coin, but it's really just a work of art. It's spectacular. So.
Any other questions from the attendees? Well, Lynn, that was fascinating. Thank you very much for taking your time to talk with us tonight about this and sharing your expertise. It's very much appreciated. And I hope at some point, oh, here's something in the chat. Let me see here. Oh, well done. So I think everybody enjoyed it. I really want to thank you again for taking the time. And just for everybody to know that this recording has been, or this talk has been recorded and will be available online on the Manuscript Society website, manuscripts.org. And please share it with others who may have couldn't have made the talk. So, and next month in October, we're going to have Harrison Wick talking about manuscripts research or manuscripts in the use of forged printing books. And Lee corrected the website, it's manuscript.org, not plural. So thank you, Lee. So thanks again, Lynn. I
All
really
right, thanks,
appreciate
Jay.
it. And have a great evening, everybody.